1, 2. Take 1.
Showtime.
Let's celebrate our right to exist and to exist with joy.
You're inside that journey.
Oh, buenos días.
Being able to do something like this is new. It's very different.
You have no idea what I could be.
Like a family.
You can change the world.
It's unreal to witness.
They're talking about kicking out all the dreamers. It's time to make some noise.
It does sound like the work of a hero.
Yeah, there you go.
One more time, please.
That's it.
It's something to celebrate, and it's beautiful to watch.
We'll see you guys next time.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 2021 New York Latino Film Festival. My name is Ericka Beltrán, and I am the Director of Content in the Enterprise-Wide Equity and Inclusion Group at WarnerMedia. WarnerMedia is a proud sponsor of the festival, and we're so excited to bring you this conversation today, Latinas Who Lead, featuring some of our powerhouse decision makers at WarnerMedia. I'm joined today by Christy Haubegger, Executive Vice President of Communications and Chief Inclusion Officer, Diana Mogollón, Senior Vice President and General Manager at Stage 13, one of WarnerMedia's digital studios, Jackie Gagne, Senior Vice President of Multicultural Marketing for HBO Max and HBO, and Sara Rodriguez, Senior Vice President of Documentary Programming for HBO. Welcome, everyone. Christy, I want to kick off with you because the work of the Equity and Inclusion team at WarnerMedia really is a through line for all of the groups that are represented here today. You started Latina Magazine to really close that representation gap among Latinas in media. What was it like leading the charge for inclusion in a time when maybe it wasn't as top of mind as it is today?
I'm enormously optimistic. I think things have changed a lot. Some things have not. You still have to have the conversation as to why, this perspective needs to be part of the decision, or you still often have to explain that this is actually what the audience looks like. I think we still often tend, and a lot of our artists, they tend to sort of produce and imagine in the world that they grew up in, which might have been a very small world, right? And it's going to make us better. It's going to make us, really see different perspectives. And so I'm encouraged by that. But that would be one thing I would say, to learn from my experience. And so I think what we do matters a lot. And what we do in this business in terms of storytelling and being in the room when we choose what stories get told is enormously important.
So speaking of who gets to tell these stories, Diana, I love how Stage 13 is really shepherding in a new generation of content creators. And I'd love to hear how your own intersectionality as a Latina, a first-generation person in this country influences those decisions that you make when you're supporting this kind of multifaceted storytelling.
Thank you, Ericka. Thanks for having us here today. It has everything to do with it. I feel like I'm an infiltrator now. I'm on the inside sort of helping create that change. So when I'm in my role today with the team and really looking at, where are the storytellers? How do we source them? How do we really create those pathways into the industry? It really reminds me, it's very relevant to my own journey into this industry and through this industry. So because of that, it is very far reaching and wide. It is sort of, up at dawn, from morning to night, because really it's a path to yes, as opposed to a path to no, and understanding the sort of systemic nature of this industry and the traditional legacy way of thinking. A lot of what we do is sort of create alternative pathways and complementary pathways and models, whether that be a creative way of looking at a new storyteller, somebody who's coming from a different medium, or marrying that with a really interesting alternative business or production model to allow that idea to get birthed, so that we take sort of that fear, we mitigate that risk and create sort of something that's very compelling, hopefully, for buyers or for internal stakeholders.
That's amazing. I love that path to yes. Jackie, I'm going to throw it to you because it sort of reminds me a lot of the work that your team does, which is build that community. I'm thinking of something like Palante, the HBO Max hub that houses content for and by Latinx content creators. Can you talk us through how that came about and what it meant to you as the leader of the group and a member of the community to see it come to life?
Sure. So Palante is really, it's an evolution of the work that our team has been doing in serving this audience for 20 plus years. We launched, HBO launched HBO Latino, the linear service that was, the Spanish language, the first and only Spanish language premium service with original content. And so we spent a lot of time, promoting those programs, lifting up that, that talent, finding new stories for the platform. I think for Palante, it really was an opportunity for us to, as I said, to really evolve, that work, especially now that we, for HBO Max, it allowed us to, to do that work as part of our move, certainly to becoming a streaming service, but also to, make sure that we continue to connect with the culture, to highlight the stories, not just, the ones that make it on the screen, but to be able to really reflect what's happening, within the community from a creative standpoint. This was incredibly personal for me. I'm first generation as well, Cuban American, and to have something like this was just and from a team that's just so we're just so proud of the work, and the response has been just it's been incredible.
Yeah, I think that people have really responded to it, and personally, I mean, it's been so amazing to be able to just go to a place and find the things that I want to watch. So I really love that. So Sara, we share a background in news, and I'm curious about how your experience in an environment that sometimes forces you to be extra flexible, extra nimble, but also has an emphasis on being extra correct and factual. How has that influenced how you approach leadership in your current role?
Yeah, I mean, I started, and I'm also a first generation. I'm curious how many of us are first generation Puerto Rican. I've done every single job in production, from production assistant to executive producer. And so I take all of that knowledge with me, and I think it's not necessarily just news, but just that experience of knowing what each piece of the job entails, and bringing that to productions. I also think that, because of that background, you really see how many people it takes to make a piece of content, to make a film. And those are really big teams. And so when we talk about diversity and inclusion, it's not necessarily just the people that are at the helm, but also what do the teams look like, these large teams that I used to be a part of in throughout my career. And so I think I bring that perspective to HBO Doc programming, to understanding like what our teams are supposed to look like. They're supposed to look like, the world around us, and making sure that our productions, the production companies we work with, are paying attention to that.
Yeah, that's so important and so true. I didn't realize that there was so much first gen representation here, and I'm so excited by it. I think it kind of brings to mind the, we've probably all heard this about being twice, 3 times, 4 times as good. And I think along that same line, I like to maybe talk about winning and success, because you all exhibit sort of this play to win mentality. And it's actually one of the unofficial WarnerMedia culture tenets that I really appreciate. So I'm curious to hear how, what keeps you motivated to win and to succeed, keeping in mind sort of that legacy of, having to maybe overperform, overdeliver. I'll start with Christy on this one.
It's funny when I think about it, it is not lost on me that nobody handed anybody on this panel anything. Nobody walked us in the door. Nobody had an uncle who knew someone, none of us had that, right? I mean, I always think about like the fact that I didn't grow up with like a safety net. I am the safety net for my family, right? And so I think that motivated me and drove me in a way that I feel actually became an advantage, because I would say that pound for pound, I would put up anybody on this panel against any talent we have, because I know that we worked harder to get here in many cases. And I wouldn't trade anything for that journey. I wouldn't trade anything for the muscles that I think we built in terms of agility, in terms of just drive and motivation, and not seeing setbacks and challenges as ever fatal, because we all know that those are just the beginning of the fight, right? And so I don't know. I think it's
the spirit of Palante that we, it's like that really embodies that's what keeps us moving forward, right? Like the generations before us and what they experienced and what they sacrificed for us. And then, so I think that, and part of, what was instilled makes us, well, for me, and I think, I sense that everyone here shares that, makes us just want to continue.
There has never been a better time to be who we are than right this moment. And even though things are like hard in the world, and obviously we're dealing with COVID, and we know the disproportionate impacts that a lot of these things in the economy have on our community. But when you look at the census projections, I always think like our grandchildren are going to ask us, what was it like back when you were a minority? What was that like? And if we do not want to be a permanent underclass, then we actually have to seize our moment.
Yeah, I think, it reminds me a little bit of one of the things I want to talk about, which is sort of this idea of we carry everything from our experience, right? So we carry this first gen, we carry this being the safety net, and then it becomes a little bit of a superpower. So treating the culture as a superpower. I'd love to hear, maybe Diana, we can go around the room, but Diana, tell us how all of that is sort of built into how we work and how we win.
We're the Latina Wonder Women here. I mean, like we do it all, and we don't turn around, although we could say we do sometimes, but this is our superpower. We have multiple superpowers. And I think that being first generation, understanding and being business and creative, executives, and understanding how those all coexist and how they need to coexist, and understanding, very importantly, the power of these underrepresented audiences, our peeps. I think all putting that all together is that's where the superpower, sort of the rubber hits the road, and then being in an organization to be able to be the ambassadors and champions and connect the dots. I feel like what I do all day long is sort of connect dots and create business opportunities, or take opportunities and translate opportunities. So going back to being first gen and being the translator in the family, and being 10 going on 30. That's a lot of what I feel like I do as a superpower. And that's what I think with our team at Sage 13, we try and do on a broader level, whether it's an unscripted storytelling or scripted storytelling, or if it's about a production model. So I feel like that's exactly what we do. It's like exercising those muscle skill sets and activating the superpower when it's necessary.
So sometimes the success relies on collaboration. Sometimes it's with filmmakers, with colleagues. It could be with naysayers or critics. I'd love to hear about your approach to collaboration. And Jackie, I'll start with you, because your group really manages that bridge between IP and audiences. I'm curious how you work to secure buy-in from these various groups.
We get that buy-in, I think, through the approach that we use on our team. Specifically, it's it's an audience first, audience-led approach. And so, and by that we mean that we always start with the audience. We are all audience experts, and our approach there, it's it goes beyond demographics. It's looking at things like cultural insights, and what is happening in culture, and being able to infuse that into the campaign to make sure that it's authentic. And I think that is what allows us to put together campaigns, initiatives, programs that really resonate, not just with the filmmakers or those who sort of bring the projects to us, but then ultimately to the audience, because they really, through this approach, they really feel seen and heard.
Sara, same question. I think that, your work really hinges on the relationship with filmmakers specifically, who maybe have a very straightforward vision for what their project is. How do you manage that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when we work with filmmakers, we realize, our job is to help shepherd their vision onto the screen. And there's a number of different personalities that we deal with within the filmmaking team. They're artists, and sometimes that can be challenging. If you've spent many years on the story, it's hard to give up your baby, knowing that there's going to be a notes process involved. But I feel like the best part for us, and when we get pushback, is really evaluating our own communication. What am I doing that is not having this person understand what I mean? We are there to shepherd their vision and help them with clarity and all of the different parts of the notes process that happens when a film goes up on HBO. And so it's very much a collaboration. We have to learn in real time, whether or not we're communicating well. And so it's definitely a process, but it's also a process on our side in trying to figure out how best to get our message across.
Yeah, I think the big personalities across the board, probably everyone identifies with here or relates to. Christy, so you are tackling two worlds. You're not only the Chief Inclusion Officer, but you also have this huge comms world at WarnerMedia. A lot of big personalities across your various teams, my own included. I would love to hear how you approach collaboration with such a big footprint at WarnerMedia.
Oh, I think it's interesting. I feel like a lot of my job throughout my career has been one of persuasion, right? So in some ways I was in sales, which is a different kind of persuasion. And now I'm in the business of persuasion in a macro way, right? So, and I think persuasion is actually a huge skill set for anyone who wants to be an artist, right? Because your job is to enroll people in your point of view and enroll people in investing in your dream and your vision. And I get to do a version of that because in communications, it's really about persuading the world to see us the way we see ourselves, right? In the inclusion world, it's about persuading people to dream of who we could be, and I feel like my job is one of persuasion no matter where I go. And that's how I get to collaboration. And, for me, I always think about sales historically, like it's an exchange of needs, right? And what is that? If I'm selling coats at Macy's, I need you to buy a coat, but I'm also exchanging needs with you who needs a coat for winter, right? And so it's always an exchange of needs. And so I think the way that I try to approach collaboration is understanding what does that person need. And by the way, sometimes that person just needs to look good, and if that's what they need, let me see how what I want can serve that. If what they want and what they need is to be, to have a different point of view than other people, let me figure out how I arm them with something that they weren't expecting. And so I think of understanding the other person's needs as being so critical to being successful in any of these roles. And in getting people to collaborate, the first step is always understanding what they need and what are they yearning for? What are they hoping for out of this process? And making sure that they see my acknowledgement and my understanding of that, I think is how I get people on board.
So what are some ways that you're able to find balance between making things happen and letting things happen in these senior leadership roles? Diana, I'd love to hear from you first.
I think that's a really interesting question. It's sort of how you calibrate the leadership and superpowers for the right situations with the right people, because I think it's very bespoke. You have to know how to kind of apply that in practical terms. And I think that just thinking about my time here at WarnerMedia, it's going on 7 years, which is crazy to think about that. I think in the early days, it was very much about leading and charging because you were creating sort of the firestorm, right? You have to create something from nothing in a very entrepreneurial way. So I would say there, it was about making things happen, right? It was very much about putting the pieces together, a lot of persuasion to Christy's point. I love the way what you said about that, which is top of mind every day. And I think as things get going, especially as you build a team, or at least as I have built the team at Stage 13, and you hopefully empower the right people in the right roles, it's a bit of letting it happen, right? So you wanted to let it happen. The stakes are always high, but it's how you calibrate it sort of on a daily, weekly basis or by project. And so I'm hoping that I can take more of the let it happen, but there are moments we have to come in and sort of, okay, let's make it happen. I feel like that's a great question. I'm going to think about this one after the panel. How do I balance that? I think partially it's empowering your team. It's listening to yourself and checking, your areas of like, okay, am I taking too much? Let me go to the background a little bit. And I think it's also about your stakeholders. The folks that we have worked with since day one have ebbed and flowed. So now with our group of stakeholders, you also have to build a relationship and understand, where you meet them halfway, where they need you to step up a little bit more to allow them or push them to make it happen, because it requires, we all have bosses, right? It requires them to come in and do their job too. So I think along the way, it's a little bit of it all, if that answers the question.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that we all struggle with, frankly, making it happen versus letting it happen. I think that as long as you feel, you have to feel confident in the people that you've deputized to make something happen for themselves, so you can let it happen, right? And so I think it's just always I call it like soup tasting. There's like ways you can let something happen with having little checks along the way so that you set somebody up for success. I think this is also the case when we work with first-time filmmakers. It's a really daunting process to work for the first time with HBO, and sometimes it's the first time they've ever made a film, period. And so while you don't want to micromanage them, you want to set them up for success. So you just have to make sure that you're giving, and whether this be a filmmaker, your filmmaker or your teams, enough support so that they can be successful.
Yeah, I think it makes me think about how, you are all such wonderful mentors in the industry, and really paving the way for the next generation of Latina leaders. Jackie, I'm curious to hear, what are you hoping that this next generation learns from your own journey?
I hope that this next generation learns to not doubt themselves, as I did, and I'm sure many of us here doubted ourselves for the reason I think Christy alluded to it earlier, but just being sort of new on the scene, being different. And so I hope that this generation, I think they're learning to not doubt themselves, to know that they're in the room because they deserve to be in the room, learning to to continue creating opportunities because it's so critically important.
It definitely is. Christy, I'd love to hear from you. What are you hoping that this new generation is learning from you?
Do as I say, not as I do, maybe. I mean, I think, sort of this, like, I keep thinking about the fact that, when I look at this group, my guess is that everyone's exhausted, right? And I think one of the things that I would like us to learn how to do is take care of ourselves. And I think as Latinas in particular, that's sort of a hard thing to prioritize over other people's needs, which makes us great colleagues. It makes us great family members. But, we are still, this group and the next generation, we're still the talented 10th, right? We're still beating the odds by being here. And, it's important that we don't have a lot of Jackies. We don't have a lot of Saras. We don't have a lot of Dianas or Erickas. And so, like, how do we sustain and make the allocation of how we use our energy and our resources to both protect, like, who we are in our lives and our mental health and our physical health, as well as doing the things we need to do to move us all forward. And I think that balance is something that maybe our generation struggled with. But I love the fact that, like, self-care Sundays did not exist when I was, growing up. The idea that I would, just like do stuff for me, I would have felt embarrassed about, or I think, or guilty or something. So I love the fact that this next generation has a very different approach to those things.
Yeah, I hear that. I also think that this generation, I hope that they come to work, come to their careers as their full, authentic selves. All of their nerdiness, all of their funniness, all of it. I think that that's something that's really changed a lot in work culture, which I think is fantastic.
yes, I hope that this generation has learned that, because, again, early on in my career, I felt like I couldn't do that. And that to be successful and to get promoted and to be really taken seriously, I had to, I had to present a certain way, which means I was not fully myself. And so I'm glad that that's no longer, I'm glad I no longer think that way, that I don't have to be. And that I am in a position to, I'm leading a team where I want them to bring themselves. So I think that's a great point, Sarah.
And sisterhood, we have to make sure we all connect and lean on each other, for community and for advice and for, just making sure there's a commonality and a base that we can all work off of and regain our energy when we're low on energy and exhausted.
All of this is resonating so heavily with me. Recently, I took an aptitude test, and one of the things I scored really poorly on is rest. So I love that. I love that we have to kind of keep it top of mind that culturally it's not something that's always taught to us. And so I appreciate hearing that all of you are encouraging your teams to really lean into that and take care of that, especially now with, everything that's going on in the world. It's really wonderful to hear. I want to sort of close this off with looking at the future. I'll start with Christy. What's changed since Latina? What hasn't changed? And we'll go around the room and sort of think about what we're looking forward to in the industry at WarnerMedia, in the sort of Latino culture and content environment.
So I'm really optimistic because now that we have to compete globally, I feel like just acknowledging that most of the planet's not Caucasian, right? That's just true of the earth. Talent is equally distributed, but the opportunities haven't always been. And one of the things that I feel like we're in the midst of doing right now is reallocating the opportunities. And I think that is going to drive so much innovation in our business, so much great new storytelling. And the truth is, we need it right now. We have to innovate to compete. We have to be inclusive to compete, because I know that when there's, 500 scripted shows on television, if we don't show people something they haven't seen before, we're not going to get their attention and we're not going to win. And so I know that diversity and inclusion drive innovation. And so I think it's going to be really, really critical. And there will never be a better time to be who we are with our voices than right now, because we're going to be essential for success.
Yeah, I mean, innovation. I'm looking at Jackie. Can you tell us a little bit about how you're encouraging your team to stay innovative in this changing industry and as audiences change, and what you're looking forward to?
Well, as far as innovation, yes, I'm absolutely challenging the team. I think as we just continue to evolve our work in reaching these audiences, it's so important for us to find sort of new creative ways to do so that, again, are particularly relevant, culturally relevant to the audience, to, the experiences that we create, because so much of my team's work is about creating those immersive experiences. And so I think that finding new ways to do that, whether it be through introducing, technology or whatever that might be, that is something that we, I'm excited for, and that we will, that we'll continue to do. What has changed is what's happening right here. Right? It's like that we are all here having this conversation, that we are, have these roles where we are leading teams that are also more, reflective of the customers that we serve. So I'm hopeful about that. I'm hopeful that, I'm encouraged by, our roles in particular, that we are, involved in the decisions about the stories that get told, the storytellers, that we can play, we can influence that. So I think what hasn't changed, we need more of it, right? Is that we definitely need more of it, that we need I think we still have, there's obviously there's work to do in terms of making sure that we can occupy more of those spaces and have and play more of a role in those decisions.
Yeah, definitely. Diana, same question. You're actively changing what stories are being told as well. What hasn't changed, and what are you looking forward to?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything's changed. I think that, when I think about when I started in the industry, I think to Christy's point, like it was always a year of the Latino, it was the decade of the Latino. And I think that, for multicultural audiences, I think we've heard that in many regards. I think, I'm not saying finally, I'm saying that the conversation now is an active one, and there is more there, and media companies and talent. And there's a lot of stakeholders that are trying to put their best foot forward, which is good. I think that, the world has changed, media companies and the way that the business of it all, sort of the rubber's hitting the road in terms of, cost pressure. So I think that that's all going to require a lot of innovation and a lot of problem solving. And I think that we are all by our very nature problem solvers. So coming up with creative and business solutions for the challenges of today, for media companies, for storytelling, opportunities, that's what we're great at, which is fantastic. What hasn't changed is that we have, pioneers and leaders that are moving in the background and trying to get this, to the forefront, whether it is Christy with Latina Magazine that put a flag in the sand and said, okay, this is important. This is an incredible way of showcasing and celebrating the culture. We have those storytellers and we have those pioneers. So we just have to, keep rallying around them and following the charge. What hasn't changed is that talent, like Christy said, talent is there. It's a matter of shining a light on the opportunity and creating that pathway to yes. So it's sort of a mixed bag, right? But I feel like I'm much more optimistic. I'm a glass half full person. I feel like we have all the elements of success, especially in this company and on our teams. So it's a matter of putting it all together and hopefully clearing the brush and getting the stakeholders above us to say yes, and letting us, in some cases, experiment, and in some cases, just do what we know how to do well.
Oh gosh, all of this is just like, whew, like a wave. Sara, wrap us up.
Yeah, I think what's changed is that this decision makers, the people that are making the decision in the room look very different. And that's great. And I think that, the result of that, we're not getting right now, but we will see in 5 years. I have no doubt about that the landscape will look very different in terms of what's on television. The stories that we're telling will be very different in 5 years. It's frustrating that it hasn't happened yet. We need more volume. We need different kinds of stories in every single way. Even though we have shared experience, everybody on this call, we also have very different backgrounds and different experiences. I, as a woman who grew up and who's Puerto Rican in New York, had no understanding of a Mexican American in California or a Dominican in Chicago. And so there's so many different stories that have not been told that need to be told. And there's just a variety that just needs to scratch its way to the forefront. But at least now we have stakeholders that are decision makers that are in charge of and being accountable for making sure that happens.
Yeah, you mentioned our experiences are so varied, and I think it's important to just acknowledge that, the Latino community is not a monolith, right? We're all bringing richness from all over into creating this content, into the sisterhoods, into all of the rooms that we're in. And I mean, for me personally, it's incredible to just sit here with all of you, trailblazers, and it's exciting to see and hear about all the wonderful things that you're doing on your teams. I want to wrap us up and just once again thank the New York Latino Film Festival, thank WarnerMedia for supporting this important conversation. Christy, Jackie, Diana, Sara, thank you all so much. I am so grateful to be in the community with you all, and I'm going to take all of this away from me. I was taking a lot of mental notes, but I'll be watching this again once it airs, and I hope everybody enjoys the rest of the festival and stay safe. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ericka. Thanks, everyone.